I was 15 years old. Today, the 11th of Nisan, is the birthday of the Lubavitcher Rebbe of righteous memory. And it was February 1988. I was living in Brooklyn, learning in yeshiva, and the Rebbe lost his wife. Rebbetzin Chaya Mushka passed away. As you know, they never had children. And they used to conduct the Seder themselves. The Rebbe and his wife. There was somebody who attended in the house, my dear friend Reb Shalom Gansberg, who would serve the food and help out in the house. But generally it was the Rebbe and his wife who conducted the Seder. And then she passed away. And I wondered to myself, with whom would the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, have the Seder? Every Jew in the world has somebody to do a Seder with. Everybody. Even the most unaffiliated Jews, even Jews who are not really involved in Jewish life, but for Seder, Passover, they come to a family, they come to a relative. Of course, there's the hundreds of Chabad houses all over the world that host hundreds, maybe thousands of public Seders from Kathmandu to Nepal, literally in every community. In 1984, the Rebbe asked the chief rabbis of Israel, Rabbi Shapiro and Rabbi Eliyahu of blessed memory, Zechet Tzadikim Lebracha, Reb Mordechai Eliyahu, Reb Ram Jabbar, I remember 84, he asked them to make sure that in every city there's a public Seder for every Jew who doesn't have a place to go there. And I think the Rebbe said he would sponsor it, and he did. Every place in Israel, every yeshuv, every town, every city in Israel. Every Jew has somebody by the Seder. And I remember that year, Passover 1988, there was a young boy, his name was Ari Halberstam. He was later gunned down on the Brooklyn Bridge by a terrorist in 1994. And I happened to be standing there. I saw it with my own eyes. He went over to the Lubavitcher Rebbe and he said, my mother asked me to invite you to come to the Seder by us. He lived on 706 Eastern Parkway, which was just a 2-minute walk from 770, the Rebbe's shul. So it made sense for the Rebbe to walk over 2 minutes and be at the Seder of the Halberstams. Especially that Ari's father helped in the Rebbe's house. He helped out the Rebbetzin, his wife, years earlier, in the previous years. I still remember the Rebbe smiled. He asked him to thank his mother profusely, but he elegantly declined the invitation. Rumor had it then that the Rebbe's long-standing secretary, Rabbi Leibel Groner, may have a complete and speedy recovery, also wanted to be at the Seder, but the Rebbe sent him home to his wife and children. And the person who used to prepare the food in the Rebbe's house, Reb Shalom Ber, also went home. And the Rebbe did the Seder all by himself. The yeshiva boys, there were a few yeshiva boys who decided to stay there. And they saw after some time the Rebbe came and opened the door himself to greet Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu Hanavi, and he went back in to finish the Seder himself. And this went on every single year, since the Rebbe's wife passed away until the Rebbe himself took ill. The Rebbe conducted the Seder of Pesach all by himself, with nobody present. He asked the Manishtana to himself. He asked the 4 questions to himself. The Mishnah says when you have nobody, you ask yourself all of the questions. I was only 15 in 1988, but I felt sad. I felt sad that the Lubavitcher Rebbe, a man who inspired more Seders in the world than anybody else maybe in history, a man who was responsible for making sure that hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of Jews had a place to go at the Seder so they would not be alone and they would not be forgotten. And he himself has nobody to have the Seder with. It was a sad thought. But life goes on, and I really forgot about it, to be honest with you. And life moved on. A few years ago, I was asked to do a workshop for single mothers. I did the workshop. One of the women said, I want to ask a question. And the question she asked was unforgettable. She says, Rabbi Jacobson, I had a very difficult divorce. My ex and I were constantly fighting. I believe he has narcissistic personality disorder, uses the kids as a tool against me, and it's been very difficult. We alternate Jewish holidays with the children. And last Pesach, I was supposed to have the children. I cleaned the house for a month. I bought all the food. I purchased matzah, I purchased wine, I set the table, I cleaned the house from chametz. I got all the chicken and the vegetables and the produce and the meat. The house was spotless. And I was excited. I was working hard, but I was excited that I would have the entire Passover with my 4 beautiful children. I told my friends and my neighbors and my parents. A half an hour before the holidays, a half an hour I was waiting with bated breath to welcome my beautiful children. And my ex-husband phones me and he says, oh, something came up, there's a crisis, I will not be able to bring them for the holiday. She says, Rabbi, why? I thought I would faint. I had to grab my chest and sit down on the couch. I didn't even have the strength to call my parents, to call a friend, to call a relative, to call a sibling or a neighbor and say, I want to do the Seder with you. I couldn't face anybody. I was too crushed. I was too devastated. She said, I didn't have to eat maror that night. I was the maror. My life was the maror. My entire Seder took 25 minutes. It did not feel like Passover. It felt like Tisha B'Av. And I want to ask you a question. Was this called Pesach? Did I celebrate Passover? Did I do the Seder? Was it even worth anything? I mean, there was nothing there. There was no singing. There was no family. There was no community. There was no conversation. There was no argument. How can you have a Seder without Jews arguing? There was nobody saying, okay, enough with the speeches. Let's get to the meal. Let's get to the matzah. Nobody was telling me how delicious or horrible the matzah is, how bitter the maror is. Nobody was bargaining about finding the afikoman. It was an orphan Seder. Did it even count? Was it even a Jewish thing? Did it even fulfill the mitzvah? She said, I cried through that Seder and I just went to bed. You know, sometimes a thought comes into your mind unprepared. That's what happened. A moment of inspiration entered from my unconscious into my conscious brain. And I had a flashback. A boy 15 years old, watching Ari Halberstam, may God avenge his blood, asking the Lubavitcher Rebbe to come and be with his family at the Seder, and the Rebbe saying no. Going home to my Seder, my parents, my beloved family, and thinking that the Rebbe is alone. And these words literally came to my mouth, and trust me, they were not prepared. They were literally inspired from a place which I do not know the name of that place. And I looked at this woman and I said, you know, all my life, for many years, I was perturbed by this phenomenon of the Lubavitcher Rebbe conducting a Seder alone. It so bothered me. I don't even know why, but I guess I do know why. It just didn't make sense to me. Today, I think I know the answer. As a genuine leader of the Jewish people, the Rebbe needed not only to help his people, but to experience his people. And the Rebbe knew perhaps that one day there will be Jews who will be forced to conduct a Seder all by themselves, lest they think that their Seder is meaningless and worthless and insignificant and valueless. The Rebbe was setting an example that their Seder is as potent and as powerful and as meaningful as any Seder in the world. Because trust me, I told her, trust me, the Lubavitcher Rebbe's Seder was a Seder. Trust me, he sat himself in the room, but he relived the exodus of Egypt, and Jewish history came to life in that room of that one individual. The divine presence dwelled in that one room of that one individual to teach and empower and inspire every Jew who may be forever quarantined at the night of the Seder, to know that your Seder is as special, as exalted, as energetic, as powerful, as holy and as divine as any other Seder, which may be filled with the voices of young children singing, asking the Manishtana, chewing on the matzah, and bargaining with their parents for the afikoman. I told this woman, if the Rebbe's Seder was a Seder, and it was a Seder, trust me, your Seder was just perfect.